Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. We've got a really fun episode. I've got Kevin Yee, who is a YouTuber, and I asked if I could borrow some of his audio for this episode. He's interviewing a resident and doing the reality versus expectations. And for those of you that don't know what that is, you take 5 questions, and it's what you thought something was going to be, and then you end up with something different. And she goes and answers the questions and says, this is what I thought residency would be like, and these are some of the surprises that she had. So after that interview, I will announce the 4 winners of the APHA Travel Stipend Contest, and hope you enjoy this episode. I've only got the first 20 minutes of it, and then if you want to listen to the rest of it, you can listen to it at Kevin Yee's YouTube channel. Just put in Kevin Yee Pharmacy, and you can hear the rest of that interview.
Literally nothing about you. I just slid in your DMs and just asked you to do this interview on the fly. So I think,
very true.
Yeah. So do you know what reality versus expectations is, by the way?
I've seen a couple of your videos. I think you did one on independent pharmacy and compounding pharmacy, so I glanced a little bit at that.
Yeah, I believe I did one on informatics and a whole bunch of different things. But basically, for y'all that don't know what reality versus expectations is, all it is basically 5 things that she thought that her pharmacy residency would be like and what actually happened. So it can give you a better gauge of whether you want to pursue residency or not and whatnot. So, and dispel a lot of the rumors and whatnot. So I think it'll be really fun.
Yeah.
First of all, what made you want to do? Let's go back. Let's go into the reasons why you did residency and all your history and stuff. So, what made you want to even do residency?
So I have a lot of experience in retail. I worked also at an independent pharmacy before, so I didn't really know much about clinical pharmacy going into it. After my P1 year, they gave me an opportunity as a student to do an observership program. So basically, I was at a local hospital for 6 weeks, and I got to shadow pharmacists both in the central pharmacy area where they fill the medicines for the patients, and then another 5 weeks of shadowing various clinical pharmacists in different roles such as infectious disease, cardiology, transplant. And then after seeing that interaction and just their dynamic with the medical team and the interventions they were able to make, I started becoming really interested in clinical pharmacy and going through a residency to get that position. And then I became really involved with SSHP, or the Student Society of Health System Pharmacists, which is kind of a local chapter of ASHP, which is the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. And through there, I was able to talk to different practitioners who were working as clinical pharmacists and seeing whether or not it was something that I thought I would want to go into.
How did you know it was for you? I know you did a little bit of shadowing, but what was that experience like actually finding something that you actually were interested in?
Yeah, so before that, I guess I only thought I could be either a retail pharmacist where I worked before, an independent pharmacist, or working in the hospital just filling meds. I didn't really know that pharmacists could be part of a rounding service and working with physicians. And I'm the type of person, based on my personality, I really like talking to people face-to-face and doctors face-to-face, which is what I missed in retail, because you call them and then you'll make a recommendation. They're like, who are you? And why are you even making this recommendation in the first place? Whereas in hospital pharmacy, I noticed you work much closer with the physicians, and I really like that. I also like the aspect being able to see everything about a patient and being able to make more clinical recommendations, since you have their labs, you have their allergies, you have some of their old medical history, which you might not be able to have in retail pharmacy. So I really like that as well, and being able to use what I learned in school to help the patients that I'm serving.
I definitely feel that more source of autonomy and empowerment too, because you have a lot more authority to do things. You're doing your PGY1 right now, right?
Yeah.
Since there's a whole bunch of different type of residencies, what type of residency are you doing right now?
So I'm doing what we call just a general practice PGY1 or postgraduate year 1. So in a PGY1, they have you experience a variety of different rotations. It could depend on the hospital. So I work at a hospital that's very ICU and cardiology focused. And so those are 2 of our core rotations we have to do. And of course, you have infectious disease, internal medicine. So it's kind of getting a little bit of everything. I know there's other types of residencies like managed care, or there's some residency out there where you can specialize, such as a PGY1 specialized in pediatrics or a PGY1 specialized in ambulatory care, where you have more rotations that are geared toward those specialties. But the one I'm in right now, which is probably the most common one out there, is just a general practice. So you can see a little bit of everything and see what you really like.
And now that you're you're almost done with your PGY1, right?
Yeah, I'm about 7 months in now.
Yeah. So are you planning to do PGY2 and all that as well?
So I actually decided to early commit to my program to do a solid organ transplant, PGY2.
Ooh.
So next year I'll be one of the PGY2 residents in solid organ transplant.
Dude, that's awesome. So let's jump into it. Let's do the reality versus expectations as planned. Like I said earlier, we're going to do 5 different things that Janice actually expected and what really happened. So Janice, what was your first expectation going into a PGY1?
So my first expectation, so as a student, you rotate and you have some experience with your APPEs in hospital pharmacy. And so as a student, I remember being so intimidated by the medical team, by the attendings, by the medical residents, and always talking to my preceptor and asking them questions because I was so scared to just make any interventions. And so I thought it would be very similar going into residency. And it was at first because you still had to build that rapport with the team. But I realized it is actually much easier to talk to medical residents than it seems because they are doctors, so it can be intimidating, but there's also a lot. They're still learning. So they're learning just like you are because they're residents, and there's a lot of things that they don't know that as a pharmacist or as a pharmacy resident that you can help them with. And so I've been able to make really good relationships actually with all the medical residents that I've been on service with. And so I have all their phone numbers, and I tell them they can always text me. So they text me if they have a question about a patient or if I have something that I want to intervene on. It's much easier to tell the medical resident instead of trying to find the attending on the floor, trying to make a recommendation to the attending. I kind of just bypass and go through the residency.
Yeah.
If I could do an intervention that way. And I've actually become friends with a couple of them as well, which I didn't really expect going into residency. And it's much easier to talk to them. And it's really nice with the medical residents when you have a team because the attendings tend to teach as well. So whatever they're teaching the medical residents, you kind of get to listen in on as well. And you also get to learn a lot from the attending when you have residents on your team.
Yeah, it sounds like going into residency, you're kind of scared about like making recommendations. You thought it'd be really scary and you wouldn't really have a voice. But it's really cool to see that you actually get to work on a team and develop those relationships too.
Yeah.
What kind of, like, as a pharmacist, like, as a clinical pharmacist, what kind of things do you find yourself helping the residents with most?
So, of course, medical residents, they think very whole picture body. So they're trying to see what's wrong with the patient, what are their problems, and how can we fix them. So sometimes they're not as focused on some of the medications. So they'll put them on the right medication, but it might not be the right frequency or dose which is commonly seen actually with antibiotics. So they'll say, okay, this patient will need this antibiotic for this infection and at this dose, but they don't always look at their creatinine function if we need to adjust the dose. So that's probably the most common intervention that I do is adjusting a dose for a patient based on their renal function or their age, or they don't always look at drug interactions either. So, they have that click fatigue. So you have all these alerts come up on the electronic medical record. Everybody just bypasses it. But some of them are clinically relevant. And so as a pharmacist, you can look through the profile and see that there's an interaction between some of the meds that sometimes the doctors don't see right away, or even recommending a lab be taken for a patient. For example, QTC prolongation, which you can see, with like amiodarone and Levaquin. Sometimes, there hasn't been a level for like a month. So you probably should get one to see if we need to change therapy. So those are kind of the most common recommendations that I make.
What was your second thing, by the way?
My second thing is confidence. And so that kind of goes into line with being intimidated, talking to the medical team. So as a student, you feel like you don't know anything. And even as a resident, you feel like you don't know anything, especially coming out of pharmacy school. Someone told me that when you graduate pharmacy school, that's when you think you know the most. And then when you start working, you realize how little you actually know, especially trying to incorporate what you learn in school, because what you learn in school doesn't always apply to real world.
Can you give an example about that? Like something every day that you experience? Yeah,
so one example, for example, we have our first line agents that can be used. So you're like, okay, I should always use, let me see. So trying to think of a clinically relevant example. For MRSA, let's use vancomycin, for those infections. But things that you don't think about is, okay, we want to send the patient home now, but they still have an MRSA infection. We can't just send them home on a line with vancomycin being infused on them all the time and get home health to see them. Patients don't really like that. So you have to think of other alternatives like linezolid or something PO that can be taken. So making recommendations like that, or sometimes medications could be resistant. And so, a doctor might put them on whatever the first line drug is empirically. But of course, when cultures come back and you see resistance, you can recommend changing to a more appropriate agent, which is kind of, in school, you're kind of used to spitting out what you remember what the first line agents are. You're like, oh, there's second and third line agents, but you're like, those aren't important.
Yeah.
But in real world, sometimes you do have to use those, or especially, I think a big thing is drug allergies.
Yeah, especially with antibiotics.
Patients might be allergic to penicillins or allergic to cephalosporin, so you might not be able to use the first line agents and think of, some weird alternatives for that patient if they can't use it. So those are kind of like the most common I can think of that you kind of have to be a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
And not just go by what the textbook says or go by what you learned in school per se. And so, confidence. So going to residency, I felt very unconfident in my skills. And that's actually one reason why I went into residency, is trying to become more confident.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, gain that knowledge, because I felt like if I went straight into work, something bad was going to happen to one of my patients because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to be being a resident's nice because you're kind of an in-between. So you're independent because you have your license, you can verify orders, you're a pharmacist, but you still have a preceptor. So in a way, you're almost like a student because you can still run things by somebody and ask them for recommendations and some help. So that's really nice, I think. And one of the reasons I also considered going into residency. And so confidence, so it's nice looking back like 6 or 7 months ago when I first started. I remember staffing for the first time in the hospital pharmacy and only verifying like magnesium and potassium orders because I was so afraid to verify orders because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to look for. I was scared if I verified order, if something would happen to my patient. That would be my worst fear.
Yeah.
And so now I verify much more things than potassium and magnesium.
I hope you do.
Yeah, going through, and especially rotations help a lot because I've had my ICU rotation already. I've had infectious disease. I've had anticoagulation. So I've just gained so much more knowledge now, and I'm so much more confident in what to look for, what interactions to really know, what labs I should look at when verifying meds. So I feel like I'm more confident, and just hearing feedback from my preceptors helps a lot too. Because at the end of each rotation, we do kind of a sign-off where we talk to our preceptors, see what our strengths are in that rotation or what we can work on the rest of the year. And so it's nice to hear from your preceptors when they compare you to day one to the end of the rotation, how much you've improved or how much more you know now and how confident they are in your abilities to dose those certain medications. So I think I've gained a lot more confidence now. And I remember one of my preceptors told me, even during rotation, that I need to work on confidence because I know what I'm doing. I'm just not confident enough to bring it to the team. So I would always still ask my preceptor, hey, I want to make this recommendation. Does it sound okay? And after a while, he was like, stop asking me, just ask the attending during rounds because you've been asking me for 3 weeks and you're a resident. You should know. You should be able to do this. So I think after that, I'm so much more confident now calling doctors and not being afraid to defend my stance, because some doctors or some residents may not agree with what you want to recommend for your patient, even though you think it's what's best. And maybe it's not right because they know the patient more than you do, since you're kind of just looking at notes. You don't see the whole patient every day. But sometimes as a pharmacist, for example, one time I was working and there was a patient on vancomycin that was dosed very incorrectly for hemodialysis. So hemodialysis, it should be dosed on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, or whatever days they get hemodialysis after that day. So it's not like an everyday dose. And this patient was on everyday dosing. And so I called the physician, I called the resident, and he just did not want to discontinue the order. He said, it's fine. I think it's correct. And so, it's easy to just back down and be like, oh, the doctor says it's okay. The doctor says that. But you also want to care for your patients and think about your patients first. And so, I knew that this dose isn't right and that there could be some consequences for the patient. So I just kept pushing, gave him some literature, some evidence of why we should change the dose. And eventually he agreed to change the dose as well. So things like that, I don't imagine myself doing 7 months ago, but now that I've gained experience and I've really taken ownership of my license, because another thing you think of is you could also lose your license if something happens if you verify an order and it's incorrect. And so you really want to take that responsibility and care for your patient. So even if a doctor doesn't agree with you, but if you think it's right, I think it's very important to stand up for your decision, to give background information, and to really push your stance if you think it's a patient safety issue.
Wow, that was a lot. I was going to ask you, like, what are the best ways, like, as a new resident, like, what's the best way to build confidence? But you said a lot of different things. You said getting honest feedback from your preceptor, trusting in yourself, and knowing, like, when to pick your battles. And if you have to, like, send literature, send evidence and stuff, too.
And I think experience, too, is a big thing. I think once you get experience, I mean, wherever you work at, whether it is retail or hospital, independence, you're going to feel inadequate when you first start working as a new grad. But sometimes some people will, not everybody. Some people will.
No, I 100% agree with that. I remember like my first days like practicing community, and I was just like, I was a huge mess. Like, even though I've worked community pretty much like for a really long time, like it was really different being a pharmacist.
Yeah, it's different having your name on that medication order compared to having the pharmacist that you were working for under before.
Because not your license.
Yeah. I think
their
it's
license.
more scary in retail because you have to really check what your technicians are doing. And because you can't always trust, what they typed in or what they put in the bottle. So you have to be very careful. I remember when working retail, it was, looking up to my pharmacist and how detail-oriented they were.
Yeah, and it's like, I think a lot, like, especially with community, I feel like it's more of the soft skills that really push you forward, because as you get to work with someone, you get to know their strengths and weaknesses, just like how your preceptor kind of assessed you. But there's certain things where that, they're more a little error prone, so you just try to catch on to that a little better,
Yeah.
So that's number 2, confidence. What's number 3?
Number 3 is, I think, time management. You hear that in school, and you think in school you're able to manage time going, from undergrad to pharmacy school. You're trying to balance being well-rounded, whether that be leadership or community service, but still trying to make decent grades to pass pharmacy school or anything else that you're involved in outside of school. Coming out, especially me, I thought I had pretty good time management skills.
Yeah.
I keep a calendar, I keep a planner, I'm on top of my deadlines. But residency really is a different world with time management skills, because not only do you have, your patients to work up, meetings with your preceptors, but you also have research projects you have to work on. Sometimes you have to teach lectures for certain colleges of pharmacy, or you have to help, like for us right now, we're help with interview sessions. And so you really have to be on top of your deadlines. We do a lot of presentations at some of the clinical meetings that we have to prepare for. And then you have to also be flexible, I think, because like random things happen and you just have to roll with it. For example, if a code happens, you have to drop everything that you're doing and go to that code. Or you might have your preceptor or the manager ask you if you can pick something up. And so you'll have to work on that on top of everything else that you have planned. So I think time management is a very needed skill in residency, and making sure you're on top of all your deadlines, because it's not like pharmacy school where you have a syllabus and they're like, okay, these are your exams and you kind of study every so often to get ready for your final. In residency, depending on the program, they'll just tell you, okay, it's due at this time. So you have to make your own timeline of when to work on these things in order to finish everything by deadline. And it could be harder for some people compared to other people, depending on what your experiences are and how you manage your time in pharmacy school and what you're involved with before. But I think, time management is very hard, especially also trying to balance work and home life, trying to balance, still spending time with friends and still doing the things that are important to you, whether that be community service or going to the gym or anything else you're involved with. I think those are also things you have to consider when doing time management, because residency is important, but you also need to take care of yourself.
So, like, how often do you look at your schedule, or how do you balance everything out then?
Yeah, so our program itself actually gives us a calendar of all our deadlines for the year and when kind of the major projects are due. I have a daily schedule that I do depending on the rotation, and so I either work up patients and then I have a schedule for rounds and meetings for that rotation, and then I also have my personal planner where I write down kind of all the things going on in my life that I have to do. And then I have my Google Calendar, which kind of incorporates like my work email calendar and also some personal stuff. So I have a lot of calendars. And then I kind of color code my calendar too by importance. So all my hard deadlines and more important deadlines are in red. Things for family are in another color. And then other assignments for work I have in another color to help kind of balance those things out.
And how often I know you have a daily thing, but do you like look at goals and timelines on a weekly basis, monthly basis as well, or like?
Yeah, so I usually look every Sunday or every Saturday kind of to see what's happening the week ahead, what things I need to prepare for, whether it be topic discussions or a presentation I have to give. I'll give those a look. And at the beginning of every month, I look also to see what's coming up for that month, whether it be a hard deadline for a research project or things that we might need to submit for some of our clinical meetings. I look at those too.
Oh, cool. I know every single residency is different, but what's a rough estimate of how much time you spend on residency?
Yeah, so like either at work or doing stuff residency related.
Yeah. Like, what is the sense of time commitment, for a residency?
Yeah, so on average, people would probably say on average, in general, residency, you work about 60 to 80 hours a week. So whether that be physically at work or doing stuff at home. For me in a day, I'm usually at work, depending on the rotation, of course, and how early you have to round. I would say like 7 to 5 or 6:30 to 5. So that's about 10 hours, 11 hours a day that I'm here at work. And then sometimes I'm at home, reading as well, reading for articles or for topic discussions. So I would say probably I'll spend 12 to 13 hours a day doing like residency related stuff. And then on the weekends I work a little bit more those weeks as well. And then we also, at my program, we do evening shifts. And so we work until like 10 p.m. on those days. So those days are like 16 or 17 hours long.
Can you take me through a typical day for like a residency?
So usually in the morning, you come in, work up patients. So let's just say theoretically around at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So I come in, depending on how many patients you have. So I'll come in maybe 6:30 or 7 o'clock to look at my patients, work them up, get ready for rounds. Maybe at the beginning of residency, you might meet with your preceptor 30 minutes before, so maybe 7:30. And then you'll round with your team at 8 o'clock to, let's say, lunchtime around or 11:30 around. And then sometimes during the lunch meetings, you'll have presentations either given by students, given by other residents, or other meetings you have to attend. So that might be until 1:30. And in the afternoon, it's really more of following up on your intervention, seeing if those were followed through or anything else you need to check up on or follow up on from rounds. Topic discussions with your preceptors, meetings with your residency director, or working on your projects is mainly in the afternoon.
Yeah, that definitely gives us a better sense of like the time commitment for like pursuing a residency and stuff. Let's see, we're on number 3. What's number 4? What's your 4th expectation?
All right, well, that was Kevin Yee, and hopefully you'll go over to his YouTube channel and listen to the rest of that interview. But we try to keep them to 20-25 minutes for your commute. Just a quick announcement regarding the winners of the contest. So most Facebook likes, congratulations to Carly Roberts, University of Louisiana Monroe. For the review of Pharmacy Leaders podcast episode, that goes to Casey Rathburn, the University of Houston. And for the review of Memorizing Pharmacology, A Relaxed Approach, the audiobook, that goes to Eric Simpson. And I believe he's from University of the Sciences. He's got, on his Facebook, he's got all kinds of Philly stuff on, so I'm assuming that's where he's from. Seems pretty clear. And we have a problem, though. So there was another outstanding person who got, I think, a ton of Facebook likes, has clearly been a leader at his own chapter, and so just needed to add this 4th stipend. So Anthony DeAngelis III of the University of Rhode Island, congratulations as well. So the 4 of you, just get in touch with me. I'll be at the meeting. If we don't cross at the meeting, where I can just hand you the check, I can get your address or whatever and give it to you after. But the only thing you have to do now is just make sure that you go to the meeting. I thought it would be fun to do one more contest, so we have a month left before the meeting starts. And I don't know if a chapter can put this together, but I talked to somebody and said, what would be really cool. And what I guess I care about the most is making sure that other people understand their medicines. And that Memorizing Pharmacology, a Relaxed Approach book really came about because when I went in to teach pharmacology class, I would always hear, "You're not going to fail me, are you?" And it's very tough when someone is scared of something that they're going to learn about it. So think about your patients being scared of something and how much can they learn if they're scared of the medicine. That's going to be a skill that we need. So here's the challenge. This is a challenge for the APHA ASP chapters. And what I'll do is, if this does work out, and there's 2 of them, I'll hand the check to the communications or the VP of communications at that VP of communications meeting that I think is on Sunday. I'll try to find you, and you can give it to whomever you would like at your APHA ASP chapter. If you already won, that's fine, and you've got somebody else in the chapter, any of those 4 who are the leaders in those chapters can do it as well. But here's the challenge. Very simple, just like Eric Simpson did, just like Casey Rathburn did on the Memorizing Pharmacology Audible.com reviews, and it has to be a review of the audiobook. It doesn't count if it's an Amazon.com review. And if you can get 25 reviews, and it doesn't have to be chapter members, the award goes to the chapter. It's just 25 people that in some way probably need to learn about drug names. And the book is free if they've never been to audible.com. So I'm not trying to get people to buy a book, and I know the math doesn't work out for that. So the challenge is this. First 2 APHA ASP chapters that get to 25 reviews of memorizingpharmacology.com on audible.com. I'll be happy to hand each of you travel stipend check for the registration of $278. Again, I don't know if it can happen. I don't know if that's something that you would be able to muster the troops to do, but I just think it would be interesting, and it would certainly be valuable to me. The most valuable thing I can get is feedback, and the most valuable thing for any author on Audible are reviews of their work. So again, congratulations to the winners, Carly, Casey, Eric, and Anthony, and I hope you guys take me up on this challenge, and I'm hoping to give out 2 more checks at APHA, and I'll give them to the VP of Communications, because I think the most important thing that I can give you as someone who's been in practice for almost 21 years is that the biggest problem you're going to run into isn't going to be the job market and the residencies and all of those things. The biggest problem you're going to run into is being ignored and not being noticed. And as a profession, the most important thing that we can do is make sure that the things that we're doing are getting noticed, and those fall under the communications VPs, getting the word out there. Just like I know the University of Houston had this viral campaign that just was absolutely phenomenal. So those are the types of things that I'm hoping an APHA ASP chapter will do. And I think that if you can get 25 people to put a review up, then I think that you've done a pretty good job of showing that you can do those kinds of things. So good luck to everybody. Congratulations to everybody. And next time I'll be speaking to you directly will be from Nashville.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.